Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. As always, delighted that you could stop by on this wine educational channel. We really do design this to be accessible for everybody, specifically, though, for those of you studying the world of wine. We have a number of videos in parts and series that will help you really get to grips with specific types of videos across the world of wine. And here you'll see this is no different. This is the wines of the world for the WSET Level 4 Diploma. So this is on central Italy. And you'll see here there is Montalcino in the background. We are looking at series 2 here on Toscana appellations, so Tuscany's appellations, and it's a mammoth 9-part series here. So this is series 2, part 3 on Brunello Di Montalcino, DOCG. Now, this part, along with the 2 previous other parts on Chianti, are available as free content, and parts 4 all the way through to 9 are only available on my e-learning portal. That's over at www.winewithjimmy. If you have any comments or questions or concerns, please get in touch by either the social media you see at the bottom of every slide, or of course comment on this video below. Make sure you click like and subscribe as well for weekly updates. Okie dokie, let's rock and roll looking at this second series on the Toscana appellations. And of course, we're looking at the very important Brunello Di Montalcino. So first of all, where are we looking? So Montalcino is a small medieval town. It's nestled on the top of a hill, and it dates back to the 10th century. It's in the southeastern section of Tuscany, and it's about 25 miles, which is about 40 kilometers to the south of Siena. So you see we've identified it just here in this location, okay? A little bit about the history of this area. So the very important and historic town of Montalcino lies on top of a hill, as we mentioned. You'll see it just there, looking very proudly and majestically over the southern Tuscan landscape. It's surrounded by 13th century walls. You'll see this in the foreground that, of course, have been restored. So this is where the original town is located. And at the highest part of this town lies a medieval fortress, which dates back to the 14th century, 1361 to be specific. So it's generally accepted that the etymology of Montalcino is derived from Latin, and that's the Latin of Mons Ilcinus, or in today's language, Mount Ilex, which refers to the holm oak trees that still cover large portions of this area. See dotted actually on the slopes here of this medieval fortress town. Now, wine production has been a very important part of the local economy here since we know at least the Middle Ages. The real influx of travelers that were heading to Rome on the Via Francigena, which is here in this slightly sort of lilac-y browny color, and it goes from Rome, but you'll see that we've got it here, it's kind of that dotted. So it goes through here, through the heart of Tuscany, on its way up to places like Pavia and Vercelli, before heading to the French border. So this Via Francigena stopped in Montalcino. And this means, of course, it brought wealth, travelers, trade to this area. Historical evidence of this area as a quality wine growing district has been documented since the 16th century. But at this time, it wasn't what we know of today. We know Brunello di Montalcino for very famous for 100% fairly complex and powerful Sangioveses. But the most prominent wine of the 16th century were sweet wines made from Moscato, which is locally called Moscodello, which you see just here, Moscodello di Montalcino. Okay, these were even being exported to England. That's how far their importance and fame actually reached at this time. Now, then in the 17th century, red wine started to gain more importance from this area. And the first mention of Brunello in conjunction with Montalcino, as of course Brunello di Montalcino, appeared in the late 18th century and early 19th centuries. A little bit more. Now, lots of history coming your way. Now, the first wine which was bottled and sold as a Brunello di Montalcino, so in a bottle, was in 1865 by the Biondi Santi family. They remained pretty much the only commercial producer of Brunello di Montalcino all the way up to the Second World War. Now, very famously at the pioneering stage of the Biondi Santi family was the gentleman in this picture, who's Clemente Santi. He was a pharmaceutical graduate of the city of Pisa and the owner of Fattoria del Greppo, which is the estate that is at the heart of Biondi Santi and very well known at that time for Moscodello, so for your Moscato wines. Now, many things are accredited to Clemente Santi. We have the fact that he championed monoculture in terms of vines, so dedicating land to vineyards only, and his chemical and scientific knowledge led him to many innovative practices in the vineyards and in the cellars. He introduced things like longer fermentations, that's extended time maceration on the skins, racking, hygienic practices, and longer oak aging. He also rejected the addition of white grapes, which was very widespread across Tuscany, to make earlier drinking less astringent red wines. And he also rejected what's called the Governo process. The Governo process is the addition of, to generalize it, the addition of a must which is made from semi-dried grapes. Now, in 1869, a red wine which was labeled Vino Rosso Sceltor, which is Brunello, and was the 1865 vintage, won a silver medal at the agricultural fair in Montepulciano, making it the first documented appearance of a Brunello wine. And remember, Brunello, the local etymology for Sangiovese. A little bit more about the history here. This does seem like a history lesson, and it really is. We have Banfi. Now, since the 1970s, there has been huge expansion of planting of vineyards in Brunello, led by the likes of Banfi, Castello di Banfi, that you see here on the left-hand side. This is a wine company that originated actually as an importing company to the United States of America. Now, having a great success exporting Lambrusco to the United States and other countries, Banfi purchased land and planted Muscat in the southern part of Montalcino, but unfortunately that proved unsuccessful. The vines were grafted over to Sangiovese, and this subsequently led to a large commercial success for Banfi's Brunello di Montalcino in the USA and then further future markets around the world. And this really ties into the big expansion that we've seen in Montalcino. So if you go back to the 1960s, there were just 11 producers totaling 65 hectares. And today we have over 250 producers, totaling 2,100 hectares. And on the map you see on the left-hand side are all of those producers. Each little red dot is a producer. And you can see now there is a sizable concentration, certainly around the actual town of Montalcino. But it's not just Montalcino where the grapes are grown. It's grown around in other villages. So grapes, of course, are found for the majority around Montalcino on the oldest soils and up to some of the highest altitudes. But you'll notice if you go up just to the north, let's say the northeast here, we have Torrenieri. So there's another little village. That has the coldest conditions. You then have to the southwest Tavernelle, and Tavernelle is known on kind of medium altitudes. It drops in altitude for Montalcino, and it's where some of the most sort of rounded and quite rich Sangiovese. It's known as kind of a almost perfect climate to get consistent ripening from Sangiovese. But we also have Camigliano as well. Camigliano actually is right in this this western section. Very few producers out here. Produces some of the most fullest in the warmest and driest conditions. We have Sant'Angelo in Colle, which is down in the southern section, along with Castelnuove de Abate, also Sant'Angelo Scalo as well. All of these in that southern section. These tend to be quite warm, quite dry, and as you get into Castelnuovo, you get a bit more altitude, and that's why we've got quite a grouping of producers in that area as well. But really, Sant'Angelo right down here, along with Incole and Scalo, are some of the warmest parts, along with Camigliano as well. These are some of the warmest areas and picked normally much more earlier, 7 to 10 days, in comparison to the likes of Montalcino or Torrenieri, for example. Okay, so general climate types here. Now, so to really generalize, the warmer climate here is certainly warmer in comparison to Chianti Classico, and it is drier as well. It's protected from rain by the Monte Amiata mountain range to the south, but there's still adequate rainfall here, typically about 700 millimeters. So we'd say it's mild and dry with about 700 millimeters. The climate, though, is generally Mediterranean, and it benefits from western marine air currents from the Mediterranean, from the Turanian part of the Mediterranean. That's about only 40 kilometers away, and that, of course, helps to preserve things like acidities here by moderating the temperatures. But we still have a Mediterranean climate, so we have still good ripe fruit, full-bodied, high alcohol, but with altitude and the effect of the Mediterranean, we're going to get some semblance of balance from acidity. Topography of this landscape, the elevation varies. Remember, we just looked at a map of the actual area of Montalcino, noting that places like Montalcino itself and then Torrenieri are quite high altitude, but when you come right down to the south, Camigliano, and then down right in the southern section like Sant'Angelo, in Colle, now those areas tend to be lower. So you've got altitudes here ranging from about 120 meters to just above 500 meters. The minimum by law here is 120 meters, and the majority of the denomination here is what we would consider hilly. Geology in this area. Now, the northern part, where we find a huge production of Montalcino around the town, and of course Torrenieri, you'll find that it's more galestro-based, like in Chianti. And that's at higher elevations. That leads to more aromatic Brunello de Montalcinos. Now, in the warmer, drier southern sections, where it is lower altitudes, you find more clay, and that produces more fuller-bodied expressions, rounded expressions of Brunellos. Many producers, though, don't just stick to one of the hamlets or one of the villages or Montalcino. They will blend grapes from several parts of the area of Montalcino. And as in Chianti Classico, there is quite a fierce debate whether to or not include subzones, as decided, as I was going through there with the villages just on the previous slide. Regulations here with Brunello: it must be, of course, 100% Sangiovese. It must hit a minimum alcohol of 11.5% and a maximum yield of 54 hectolitres per hectare. There is aging here as well. So Brunello requires extended aging. It may not be released until the 1st of January, 5 years after the harvest. Now, this is quite interesting because your text, and this is where I have to put it in asterisks. Now, your text states 5 years, 5 years of aging, whereas in fact, the Brunello Di Montalcino Consorzio states that it is actually 4 years and 2 years in oak, and the Reserva is 5 years and 2 years in oak. So it is a bit of a difference compared from the syllabus to the actual the Consorzio. So do be careful about that. I would put down what the Consorzio says, of course, moreover than your text. The style of Brunello di Montalcino. Now, as in Chianti Classico, there was experimentation with new French barriques, but the trend in this century has been to return to large format oak, and the label may mention a single vineyard name. Prices are, of course, very much premium and super premium. And wines are typically outstanding in quality, with sour cherry fruit, high acidity, tannin, giving a good capacity to age and showing good complexities, of course, due to those tertiary notes which develop. Okay, some key producers here in Brunello di Montalcino, and we've, of course, quite extensively talked about the very famous historical aspect of Beyond di Santi, going all the way back to Clemente Santi, of course, very important. But we have the likes of San Paulino, which a wonderful estate, making some exceptional wines. Soldera is there, second from the left, and also Casanova di Neri as well. But you will have your favorites out there. Typically, the wines are towards outstanding in quality, as you know. Just to mention as well, the other appellation which is allowed here for red wines. This is called Rosso De Montalcino DOC. So this is not a DOCG, but a DOC. It requires the same law as Brunello Di Montalcino in terms of the grape variety. It must be 100% Sangiovese and from the same delimited area as Brunello Di Montalcino. But it's often made from younger vines and from less promising sites. So often those declassified that they don't think are strong enough to go into the main Brunello Di Montalcino. It's aged briefly, typically in stainless steel or in old oak to preserve primary fruit, and can be sold after a year. Typically mid-priced, some go up to premium, and they are good to very good. They can be really good value for money wines in terms of a restaurant wine list, certainly if it's not a really super Michelin star premium restaurant. Good wine bar wines are Rosso De Montalcino to get a sort of a snapshot on what Brunello Di Montalcino could be like. So yes, wonderful expressions to be found in the DOC as well. So that brings me to the conclusion, but actually we need to have a look at a Google Earth video, and that's just to put it into wonderful perspective for you. So this is just under a few minutes long. Let's have a look to bring it to life. There is the Tuscany area, which has been outlined in white. And of course, we're going to be looking down in the south, but Before we do, let's just mention the city of Siena, remember, which sits about 25 miles away from Montalcino. And there it is. So this is the real big point of reference in terms of the major city near Montalcino. So Siena, just to its north. And here we go, 25 miles down to the south towards Montalcino. I think we're going to actually look at, though, a quite important river here. Here is the Ombroni River, which is important because it actually does, we're going to follow it up from the estuary up to Montalcino. It actually does provide quite a significant boundary around the Montalcino area. So here we are following in the Ombroni River north towards Montalcino. Here you go, and you'll see we're getting to a slightly hillier area. It's coming up in the distance. The Ombroni River. Rivers actually do form a major part of the Montalcino zone. Okay, so let's have a look right here at our area. This is the Montalcino zone, and isn't it wonderful to follow that river up? So the Ombroni River really forms the west and the north border here. So this whole area is the just over 2,000 hectares of Brunello Di Montalcino. We're going to look at some of the important places. We noticed here Tornieri is the most northeasterly point, fairly high altitude here, and a few producers there. The most important, of course, we just skipped over, which is Montalcino. We come down to the southwest, which is Tavernelle, a few producers here, called often the ideal climate for Sangiovese. The most westerly point is Gimignano, where there's only a handful of producers. And then coming right over to the southern section where it's the warmest and driest, we have Sant'Angelo in Colle. We also have Castelnuovo has a little bit of altitude, you'll see here, and that is towards the southeastern section. And finally, way off in the south, we have Sant'Angelo Scalo, which really is right on the border of the southern section of Montalcino. And before finishing with the Montalcino itself, sitting very proudly, very high altitude in that sort of northeasterly section. And that really is the diversity right there that you can see. You get a good feel for the mountains and the hills in this area as well. Okay, so that brings me to the end of Brunello di Montalcino DOCG. Thank you so much for stopping by. The next video will be on Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, which is another DOCG, not too far away. But if you would like to view that video, you must go across to my e-learning portal over at www.winewithjimmy.com and subscribe for exclusive access to that video, plus parts 5 through to 9, and hundreds of other videos and extra resources to help you with your studies. Thank you so much. If you do have any comments, questions, or concerns, please pop them below this video. Make sure you click like and subscribe, and of course you can use the social media if you are that way inclined at the bottom of every slide. But until next time, if you do find yourself in the UK, please come and see me for a class, a glass or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Bye.